Hi, good evening, everybody, and welcome to KQED Live here at the Commons at KQED's studio headquarters. I'm Ryan Davis. I'm Executive Director of KQED Live, which is dedicated to bringing journalism to life on stage, amplifying local Bay Area culture, and deepening civic participation through events and experiences like this tonight. And I want to begin by asking, is anybody here a KQED member? That's a lot of you, and we are so grateful for all of your support. We can do what we do without you. It really helps make this happen. Everything else at KQED, from radio, TV, the news that you read online, podcasts that you listen to in your feed, and programs like Forum, which you're here for tonight. And we also want to thank, before I do that, if you're not a member, you can become one. There's a QR code on the screen here. There are some great benefits to being a member, including event-related benefits, like getting early access to special event tickets. And we've got a pre-sale coming up next week for Freakonomics Radio Live. That'll be happening in January. KQED members get early access before anybody else. Now, we also have some great sponsors. You saw a video about them just a moment ago, but they really also contribute specifically to KQED Live. They're Genentech, Comcast Business, and the San Francisco Symphony this year. We're very grateful for the support that they make to our mission of civic and cultural engagement. And I have one more big thanks to incredible partners that we work with to create the programming on our stage. We have a wonderful partner with us tonight. The Litquake Festival is ongoing right now, and this event is part of it. And I'm here to introduce their executive director, Nora Peel.
Thanks, Ryan. Hi, everybody. We're so pleased that tonight's program is part of Litquake, San Francisco's literary festival. Litquake is celebrating our 25th anniversary in 2024. Yeah, right? And a key component of getting to that quarter century mark is great partnerships like the one we have with KQED and with KQED Live. I also want to thank Saintsbury Winery, the official wine sponsor of this year's Litquake, the ones who are pouring out in the lobby. Yeah, that's worth a round of applause, too. This year's Litquake, believe it or not, is just getting started. We have dozens of additional programs coming up, 140 in total. And that is between now and Lit Crawl, which takes over the mission on October 26th. We'll be back here on Saturday, in fact, as part of KQED Fest, with a critically important election year program on the rise of book bans. So please check out the full schedule in your program. Hopefully you found one on your seat tonight, and make plans to join us here again. It would also help us out a lot if you could take just a few moments this evening to fill out your survey and to return it to myself or to one of our volunteers at the end of the evening. More than 90% of those 140 programs that I mentioned are absolutely free to attend. And so the information we gather anonymously through our surveys is a big piece of the puzzle in gathering funding that enables us to make that happen. You can learn more about our organization, our supporters, and how you can get involved on page 31 of your printed program. Thanks so much for being here. I'm going to throw it back to Ryan to introduce tonight's host.
So you're here for a live program of Forum, KQED's flagship radio current affairs and culture program. And tonight's host is Alexis Madrigal. Let's please welcome him to the stage.
Hey everyone, how are you? It's going to be a fun night. We're going to hear some live music tonight. It's going to be great. There's some things that we all know about music. We know that just about everyone loves some kind of music. We know that music can connect us to musicians and also to each other. We know that music has a spiritual dimension that's used in basically every culture, and even by those who otherwise profess no faith. And if music is doing all of those things, that's not happening in the ether, but through our ears, in our stomachs as bass thumps, and most importantly, in our brains, which are assembling the many components of melody and timbre and tempo and lyrics all into what we would call a song. Music hits us cognitively, and it also hits us in some places and in some ways that we don't always have the words to describe. And we're going to talk about both of those today, as well as how music can actually be medicine, a form of healing. Before we get there, we're going to get a song from our guests Daniel Levitin is a neuroscientist, a cognitive psychologist, and a musician, founding dean of arts and humanities at Minerva University here in San Francisco, and James McGill, professor emeritus of psychology and neuroscience at McGill in Montreal. He has 6 consecutive best-selling books, including This Is Your Brain on Music, The World in 6 Songs, and others. His new book is There Was a Secret Chord, Music as Medicine, and he's going to be playing with special guest musician and composer Gary Muszynski. His new album is The Journey Home, Songs of Longing and Belonging. Welcome. Come play, come play.
There is delight in singing, though none hears. Beside the singer, there is delight, there is delight. There is delight in praising, though the praiser sits alone, and though the praised far off from him, there is delight. All that came before us is just light, and so despite the pleas and pleasantries, we take the night. Warmer climes give brighter plumage, softer winds the breeze of alpine heights. You spread your wings to find what's right. The siren sings the ships at sea, though none hears. Beside the mast, there is delight, there is delight. There is delight in facing life, delight in cursing death, and though the body is at sea, there is delight. All that came before us is just light, and so despite the pleas and pleasantries, we forge the night. Warmer climes give brighter plumage, softer winds the breeze of alpine heights. You tend to strings to find what's right. There is delight in calling out your name, though you're not here beside the singer. There is delight, there is delight. There is delight in ties that bind, delight in knowing we are one, and though we are lost, there is delight. All that came before us is just light, and so despite your pleas and pleasantries, we forge the night. Warmer climes give brighter plumage, stronger winds the breeze of alpine heights. Spread your wings to find what's right. You spread your wings to find what's right. Help me out here now. You spread your wings to find what's right. Thank you very much.
Daniel Levitin and Gary Muszynski on the drums. Take a seat. So tell us about the song. Why this song to come out? What does the song mean to you?
I have been writing songs for since I was 18, I'd say. And I mostly write songs to remind myself of things, of feelings, or to work through different emotional things. And most of my friends are songwriters, and I think that's sort of what we do, and it's what writers do. I think you don't write because you've figured something out. Joni Mitchell taught me this. Joni Mitchell, I met in 1996, and she started working with me on my songwriting and mentored me. She said, you don't write a song when you've got the story. You write a song when you're seeking the story, and the song helps you to find it. The song helps you to figure out what you think or how you feel. And so for this one, I wanted to, I'd gone to visit the Dalai Lama for a private session in 2019 in preparation for writing my book, Successful Aging. I was meeting all kinds of people who were over the age of 85 and doing fabulous things.
Did you just like send an email to like Dalai Lama? Like, how did you?
Yeah, Dalai Lama.
Dalai Lama at DalaiLama.com.
Dalai at lama.com.
Yeah.
He had read The Organized Mind, so it was an easy synergy, and he just asked me to come to Dharamshala, and so I read all about his gratitude meditation. I had read him before, but he just published his 125th book. So, I'd say he was successfully aging. And so I was thinking, I wanted to express gratitude. I walk down the street, I stub my toe, I step over garbage, somebody cuts me off in traffic, and it's easy to get mad, but the Dalai Lama would say, you should be delighted, that you're alive and delighted at this wonderful universe we're in. So I wanted to write about that. And then also this idea of prayer, where the praiser sits far off from the one who's doing the praising and doesn't always answer, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't meditate or pray.
And were you going through something in your life at that time that you sort of wanted to encapsulate for your side of it? I mean, obviously you were trying to capture something the Dalai Lama had to offer you, but what were you bringing to the song or to the writing process?
What an interesting question. Most of my writing, I would say, is kind of stream of consciousness, and it just percolates up like a dream. And I think it was really bringing to it the intentionality that I wanted to be more mindful in my everyday life. That's basically it.
Let's talk about...
there's a line, there's delight in facing life, there's delight in cursing death. And I was thinking about this whole business of, the writer who had said, I shall not go softly into that good night.
Dylan Thomas.
Dylan Thomas,
Yeah.
right. Mr. Harvard-educated English major. Thank you.
I think that's a gimme. Thank you. I appreciate that.
So right. It was, you should not go softly into that good night. You should fight against being complacent as you age. You should fight against death. Wrestle with it. Assert yourself is how I interpreted it. And so that was it.
Let's talk about the premise of this new book. How literally should I take the idea that music can be medicine?
How literally do you take the idea that if you were to eat the bark of a tree, it might cure your headache?
Yeah, aspirin.
It's aspirin, right?
Yeah.
Right.
That literally. So you mean it like true? Just so everyone is clear, you mean like really, truly like prescribe medicine in some sense?
Well, but there's over-the-counter too, right? You can go get aspirin, or you can make it yourself from the bark of a tree. I think the issue about music and medicine is that for tens of thousands of years it was used, hundreds of thousands maybe, and then it wasn't. And it's only since about the year 2002, when brain imaging got into the picture, that we were able to see the biological underpinnings of what the brain was doing in response to music. And because of that, we had some scientific rigor to it all. And music activates all the parts of the brain that we've mapped so far. It activates every neurochemical system that we can measure. And so it's not that one piece of music can cure everything or that all pieces of music can cure or treat everything, but just like penicillin doesn't cure every infection. I mean, but there is a literal aspect to it.
It's an interesting, at one point in the book you say music is a fascinating probe for the brain precisely because it both hits all the systems and is its own kind of integrated thing. Talk a little bit more about what sort of brain systems we're talking about. Maybe not the names of the regions, but sort of what we're talking about when we say, that...
So you don't want me to talk about Brodmann area 47?
Basal
Wernicke,
ganglia. Yeah. I mean, if you need to, feel free. But
I can control myself.
Yeah, but just like there's a different part of the brain respond to rhythm than responds to like timbre or something like that.
Yeah. So the brain evolved as a bunch of special purpose circuits, and they, there was no. From my perspective, there was no master controller saying, well, we need something that does this, we need something that does that. The idea of evolution is that as a need, an adaptive survival need arose, those people who had some mutation were able to get along better, and that mutation became instantiated in all of our DNA. So that's Darwin in a sentence and a half. But the idea then is that there was no coordination between the different circuits, and it's a bunch of special processing circuits, like a Swiss Army knife. So music or any sound hits your ears, and they wiggle in and out, your eardrums, and the brain has to then somehow disentangle that dense stream of information that's represented only as wiggling. And there's a circuit that extracts pitch, because it would be useful to know if it's an elephant or a bird that's making the noise, the low pitch or high pitch, because low pitches tend to be associated with heavier, larger objects. Another part of the brain, another circuit, extracts the duration of a sound, another one its loudness. Those durations can be bound together into a representation of rhythm, the pitches into melody. Timbre, which is the sound of, it's what separates, say, a trumpet and a clarinet playing the same note. It's the tonal color.
I almost think of it as like the opposite of MIDI. Like the old MIDI, you'd be like, beep. It's like, ugh. And all the instruments have their own
That's right.
beautiful
Yeah, that's exactly right.
additions to that.
Yeah, nicely done. So all that's different, and because it's separable, and we know it's separable, we've seen patients who have lost, for example, due to brain damage, they lost the ability to understand or process rhythm, but they retain pitch and melody, or vice versa. People lose lyrics, but everything else is there. As we see in the book with Ella Fitzgerald, who temporarily lost some lyrics, but had all the other parts of the music going.
Which we're going to hear a little bit later, not yet.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to burst your surprise.
We could. Should we play it? Let's play. So for those who don't know this story, beautifully told in the book, Ella Fitzgerald is live on stage in Berlin, right? And she's singing Mac the Knife. How many people know that song? At least a little bit of that song.
The shark has...
and at a certain point, she loses the lyrics. So let's listen into that.
Sunday morning.
So good.
Body oozing life. Someone sneaking round the corner.
She hasn't lost it yet.
Tell me, could it be Madrigal? Oh, what's the next chorus to this song now? This is the one now. I don't know, but it was the swinging tune, and it's a hit soon. So we tried to do Mac the Knife. Ah, Louis Miller. Oh, something about cash.
got that one.
Tell me, could that boy do something right?
Got that.
Oh, Bobby Darin and Louis Armstrong, they made a record. Oh, but they did. And now Ella and her fellas, we're making a wreck. What a wreck of that tonight. Oh, Snooky Dodgy.
So good. Okay, that's perfect. I mean, it's just a perfect snippet of music, isn't it?
It's just so joyful and ebullient, and it's become so many people's favorite rendition of it. And I think part of it, I have a friend named Livingston Taylor who says that the relationship between a performer and an audience is such that if the performer is doing their job, they're giving you everything they have. And as an audience member, and I'm sure you've all had this experience, I sure have, you feel like, I want to give this person something. I want to bring them flowers. I want to give them chocolates. I want to give them more than just the money for a ticket. They've not only changed the evening for me, 2 hours of supreme, sublime pleasure, but I've listened. If it's an artist I love, I've listened to them for decades, and they've given so much to me. What can I give back other than a ticket price or T-shirt that I buy? But when they make a mistake, Livingston says, when an artist makes a mistake, the audience has an opportunity to forgive you. And that makes them feel like they're evening up the scales. And it makes them feel as though they're a part of your story in a more intimate way. And they see your humanity. It's almost better. It's the exact same reason why when you see somebody walking the tightrope,
Oh, and they wobble.
yeah, I mean, they could do this. I mean, they really could. But you wouldn't watch that. I mean, it's no fun, right? What they do is, they're doing this, like they're going to fall. And so, the mistake is this essence of humanness that we all make mistakes and we want to forgive it. But from a neuroscientific standpoint, this is gold. It's like those visual illusions you may have seen in books where the train tracks look like they're converging, but they're not, or the two lines look like they're different lengths. Your brain is playing tricks on you. And so scientists have learned a whole ton about the visual system by looking at how it gets things wrong.
Right.
So here it is, we've got somebody, look at what she preserved. She did not forget the melody or the rhythm or the tempo. She maintained the accent structure and the rhyme scheme. The only thing she lost was the words. And, temporarily. And it tells us that these are separable systems. You were asking about different parts of the brain. The fact that they're separable systems is really important for music medicine.
We're going to get to that soon, but I'm also curious about...
I'm really messing you up on the order.
No, I'm into it. The integrative...
You can see how
aspect.
tightly we work this out.
Yes, yeah. What about the integrative component? Like, what brings it together into what we call a song?
So this is called the binding problem. How is it that all these disparate pieces of rhythm and melody and timbre and meter come together? They all come together later in the brain, where later is about 40 thousandths of a second, because brains work really, really fast. And then you have the song. And it happens so fast that you don't realize that the song was in these different pieces. And then once we have the song, a bunch of other stuff is happening. It activates your memory. Your brain, whether you know it or not, certainly whether you're a musician or not, it's searching your memory banks for things that are similar. Which is why if somebody starts singing a song that you've heard another, like if your friend starts singing a song that a pop song, the voices are different. There might be no instruments, but you still recognize it. Your brain's doing what computer scientists would call a pattern match. It's finding the closest, nearest neighbor in this enormous database of things.
And it can be like wildly different. It's one of the most interesting parts of the book is how much you can diverge. Like you gotta imagine like the waveform, right? The movement of your ear. The waveform is gonna look nothing like what the brain is putting together.
Well, exactly right. And yet the brain recognizes it as the same song. I can change every note in a song, and you still recognize it. We call that transposition. I can change the rhythm. I can take a ballad and I can turn it into a bossa nova. This is where jazz players live. And it's why, if you don't like jazz, that's fine. A lot of people don't. But if you do, what you're realizing is, the song is big enough to accommodate wholesale changes in everything about it.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing to think about. How far can you push that? Like, is there a point at which your brain's ability to recognize a song snaps?
There is. So, the obvious one is if you take the pitches out of the range of human hearing, but that's silly.
That's cheating. That's very much
silly.
cheating. Yeah.
There is a performance art piece where there's a composer that's playing a Beethoven symphony one note a week. And, so
Also cheating, I would note. Yeah.
yeah. So, but you can slow songs way down. I can go bump, 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 bum, bump, 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 bum, bump, 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 bump. Yeah, Beethoven's Fifth. Okay. It sort of works.
Yeah, yeah.
You can speed them up. You can change all the... There's a group called the Modern Mandolin Quartet that took Tchaikovsky's Nutcracker Suite, a piece that requires 80 musicians to play properly, and they scored it for 4 mandolins. and you still recognize it as dun 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 dun.
You mentioned the sort of evolutionary underpinnings of musicality. Where do you think we diverge from other animals in our musical, let's call it abilities, like to recognize song, to produce song, to share song? Like, do you think we're extremely different from the whales and the birds, or do you think there's some common infrastructure we share with them?
Great question. So I would expand it and ask the question about art. Do other animals have art? And if you've seen these YouTube videos of elephants painting, don't be fooled. They do not paint spontaneously. There's a lot of evidence that they were beaten and abused and trained to paint things. They do not spontaneously grab a brush and paint. There's no animal we know of that spontaneously creates art. There are things that animals do that we see as artistic. Spider webs, bowerbirds creating their nests.
Beautiful things. Animals can make beautiful things.
Absolutely. And birdsong being the obvious one. But from a biological standpoint, birdsong, although it sounds like music to us, and it certainly did to Mozart, famously, it doesn't function the same way art or music does. In other words, what characterizes human art is that we humans will do it when nobody's around. When nobody's listening, we'll sing. Birds don't do that. Birds only do that if they know there's another bird around. We will do variations on a theme, on paintings. Van Gogh painted a bunch of sunflowers, a bunch of irises. They do stereotypical, very constrained behaviors. They don't improvise. Most bird song and whale song is really their equivalent of speech. It's communication. They're saying there's a predator over there, you better hide. And in fact, the cotton-top tamarin, kind of a primate, has a different call if the predator is a snake versus an eagle, so that the conspecifics know where to hide. Birds, sing in order to attract a mate and to demonstrate that they've got a big vocal repertoire. And the whole point of that is that if the male who's doing the singing were malnourished, he wouldn't be able to sing. So if he can sing, he must have a lot of access to food and resources and minerals and vitamins. And so he's got good genes. And it's not, you could say that Mick Jagger is sexual display, of course, but it's different.
I do love Mick Jagger.
Who doesn't?
Then why do we do it? Like, why do we have, I want to reconstrain it to music away from art. Like, where do you think we began to, what's the term for it, exapt? Use
Exaptation, yeah.
Yeah, where do we start to go?
You've been reading your Stephen Jay Gould.
Yeah, apparently. Yeah.
So we don't really know how music evolved, but if it's like most things, it didn't evolve for one reason, but several. And the current thinking on this is that music preceded spoken language, My lab was the first to show, along with Vinod, in collaboration with Vinod Menon down the road at Stanford. Stanford, by the way, is the Harvard of the West.
Yeah, I've heard.
Yeah. Or actually, no, Harvard is the Stanford of the East, I think, yeah. We found that the structures that process music are phylogenetically, that is, evolutionary older than the structures that process speech. And this is why you have cases like Gabrielle Giffords, who lost the ability to speak after she was shot in the head, but learned to speak again by learning to sing what she wanted to say. And that created new neural pathways that replaced the damaged speech pathways. So you've got the idea that music came first. I think it probably sounded, Stephen Mythen's written a wonderful book about this called The Singing Neanderthals. I think music probably sounded a little like, communication was like, you remember Scooby-Doo? When Scooby-Doo wanted to ask a question, he'd go, So I imagine our cave people ancestors were doing a lot of you know, and you communicated an emotion, primarily an emotion through some kind of melodic, temporal, rhythmic utterance.
What about we'll leave evolution in a second, but what about like chimps and stuff? Do we find them drumming rhythms or anything like that?
They do drum. They like making noise, but they don't make music. They can't keep time. They can't synchronize.
So interesting.
It reminds me of a funny story, actually. A colleague of mine tested the give 1,000 chimps 1,000 typewriters for 1,000 years theory.
Yeah, right.
With like
Shakespeare,
100 chimps,
Yeah.
you know, with 100 typewriters for like 100 days.
Yeah.
And what they got was a lot of the letter S for some reason. They just kept hitting the same thing over and over again, and then they peed and defecated on the typewriters. There was no Shakespeare.
More of a
there.
performance art piece than a written work. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting too, because I feel like so much of recent scientific history has been finding things that we once thought were exclusive to humans, and we actually find them in more than humans, except this is a circumstance in which it's kind of going the opposite way.
It's a continuum, though. We've looked at monkey brains. Michael Petridis at McGill and I have looked at monkey brains and at human brains and tried to figure out why is it that monkeys don't have music. Their brains are very similar to ours, and if you look at the macaque, they've got a structure that's very similar to our structure in Brodmann 47 that allows us to predict what's going to come next in a temporal sequence. That's a fundamental ability, because the brain, if nothing else, is a giant pattern detector. It seeks to find order in a chaotic universe. It seeks to find patterns. Patterns are instructive because they allow you to predict the future. They allow you to predict whether somebody will attack you or help you if you're injured, whether that fruit that you want to eat poisoned somebody else before, a pattern of observations. So monkeys have the pattern detector. And they have things that allow them to move their lips and jaw and tongue. They have that same structure near what we call Broca's area. They're missing a key piece that ties those together, and that allows, and that piece in humans also has connections to our emotional centers and our movement centers. So they just haven't evolved it yet, and they don't understand octaves, which is fundamental to all human music. They don't understand, I mean, you can play them music, but they don't understand.
Yeah. That's so interesting. So how did music go from being what we presume was a somewhat utilitarian component of early human life into something that has such meaning for us and has such a profound effect on us, on our moods, on our emotions, and as we're getting to, on our health too?
Well, yeah, so fast forwarding 100,000 years or so, music activates emotional centers of the brain, and it releases neurochemicals that help to change our moods and behaviors and impressions of things. So, for example, our lab showed that when you listen to music you like, it activates the well-known reward circuit in the brain that previously had been associated with food reward. You're hungry and you eat and you get... If you hadn't really ever stopped to think about it, why do you eat? Well, I'm hungry. Well, what is that all about? we evolved a neurochemical signaling system that if your blood sugar gets low or your metabolism is needing nutrients, you have an urge to eat. When you satiate that urge, your brain gives you a little bit of dopamine, which says, yeah, you did a good job there.
But find more Doritos Locos.
Yeah, well, exactly, right. The idea is that we're motivated to seek things that are healthful, and we get this little neurochemical hit that tells us when we've done so as a reward. So we knew there was a food reward network, sexual reward, addictive behavior reward if you take drugs of addiction and you keep taking them. Our lab was the first to show that when you listen to music, it activates the same reward system. So it's rewarding, and in an interesting way. It's different than, say, seeing a piece of chocolate cake in a pastry case where you look at it and you begin to salivate and you're really motivated to get it. That's the dopamine system. When you eat it and you actually consume the pleasurable thing, your brain produces opioids, same as heroin, smaller amounts. And so there's this partner system between the dopamine and the opioids. And to be clear, it's not the dopamine doesn't give you the reward, the opioids don't give you the pleasure. It's that they unlock synapses and neural circuits that are designed to make you feel pleasure and all of that, and to motivate you to get more. And so in the process of all that, because music has a tempo and it's always unfolding, the idea of the prediction of the reward and the consuming of the reward are completely entangled. And there's no other thing we do that's like that, except maybe eating.
That's interesting. And it's also, it's got to be pleasurable, or at least I find it pleasurable, most people do, to both be correct in your prediction about the next thing that's happening in the song, but also to be surprised by it too.
I'm so glad you brought this up.
Yeah.
So the whole thing about music is, whether you know it or not, you're a musician or not, your brain is trying to figure out what's going to happen next. And it pretty much knows when the next thing is going to happen, because most music has some kind of a beat, but it doesn't know exactly what. And the job of the composer and the performer is to reward your predictions just often enough that you feel like you're in sync with them. And I mean, if they didn't reward them at all, the music would be uninterpretable, impenetrable. It would be awful. It would be random noise.
Right.
So they've got to reward it enough of the time to keep you listening, but they have to surprise you enough of the time to keep you listening. Otherwise you get bored, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the magic. And when they get it right, and it's different for everybody because there's no one song everybody likes and no one song everybody hates, but when they get it right, you can love a song for 50 years.
You know, is that why you think kids like to listen to the same song over and over?
It's exactly why.
Over and over.
So kids like Baby Shark.
Perhaps you have noticed.
Right.
Kids. Yeah, Baby Shark. Yeah. Oh,
Why
God.
do they like that? Because the infant toddler brain has not yet figured out melody and rhythm. They haven't yet figured out that these notes tend to lead to these notes and these rhythms tend to resolve in this way. Their brain is literally wiring itself up, sometimes 1 million new connections a day, trying to figure out how the world works. And so they want very, very simple, impoverished stimuli.
Coarse. Like, right? You know, their pattern matching is still very coarse, so it's helpful to have it be like, jing, 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 right?
And it's why at a certain age, there's nothing more that a kid wants to do than play tic-tac-toe, because they haven't yet figured out that it's impossible.
That it's the worst game of all time.
Well, yeah. It's impossible to win against a well-matched opponent. So, but they don't know that yet.
Right.
So it's all new. And as we age and develop, our taste expands and our tolerance for ambiguity and for surprise expands. And so we seek more complex music, and it rewards us more. Remember, exploration is an important part of our human history. We all descended from ancestors who had enough of an exploratory instinct, enough of an instinct to figure out how the world works, that they would seek out food if a tree ran out of fruit, or they would seek out water if the well ran dry. If they didn't do that, they wouldn't survive. So, I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, but everyone here in this room, all of us are descended from ancestors who were clever enough to find a mate through exploration. Not a single one of us have an ancestor who failed to reproduce.
That's right. Yeah. So let's get to some of the healing properties here. And I want to go in, I think, through memory and therefore through Alzheimer's and
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Memory and
yeah.
Alzheimer's and forgetting. Tell us a little bit about how you sort of approach trying to help or treat Alzheimer's with music.
Well, so music can't cure Alzheimer's, and it can't slow the progression. But this is one of the most important and potent uses of music, is in the case of Alzheimer's. So to begin with, often what happens with Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia is profound memory loss. And it can get to the point where somebody no longer recognizes their loved one. They don't recognize where they are or how they got there. They may not even recognize themselves in the mirror. This is profoundly disorienting. And one of two typical reactions ensues. They either turn in on themselves, they fold in on themselves because nothing makes sense, or they become aggressive and violent. And this is what happened with Glenn Campbell at some point with his musician Glenn Campbell, who got Alzheimer's. He began beating up on his wife because he was angry and disoriented. She had to put him in a home. When that happens, they sedate you, which is no good for anybody, but they have to do something. And what we find is if you play music to somebody in that state, if it's music of their youth, they've retained that. The way memory works is, any computer scientists here? The way memory works is what you call first in, last out. The first thing into memory is the last thing you lose. So your childhood memories are going to be more resilient and resistant to any kind of brain damage. So you get somebody with Alzheimer's, you play them music from when they were 10 or 12 years old, not when they were 6, because that has
Not
already
baby
become
shark.
banal.
Yeah, right,
Right,
yeah.
they don't want to hear that. But something from 10, 12, 14, 16 years old, it allows them to connect with this part of themselves through their memory, intact memory, that they had otherwise lost touch with. And it has profound effects. They are no longer disoriented. They're oriented to, oh, that is familiar. That's comforting. It tends to release prolactin, which is the same soothing and tranquilizing hormone released in mothers and infants during nursing. It tends to decrease cortisol levels. Cortisol is the stress hormone that causes adrenaline and anger and violence.
Sure.
Because cortisol is what you need for the fight or flight reaction.
Right.
And listening to music in that case, even for just 20 or 30 minutes, the effects can last for days. And we've seen patients who come out of themselves and start talking and coming alive again.
It's interesting, in the book you note that another neuroscientist had shown that music is a more effective cue of sort of autobiographical memory than other things.
This is the work of Peter Giannotta just up the road at Davis.
And is that basically why
and
that
Amy
would be
Belfi,
effective?
Amy Belfi in Missouri. Yeah, well, so it's partly that.
Because it kind of brings you, like you were saying, it kind of brings back the sense of self, a narrative of self.
Yeah, but there's a caveat here. So if you've heard a song that's associated with a certain time of your life, and that's sort of the way popular music has been since the 1940s. Songs get played on the radio for a certain amount of time, and you may still hear them. We still hear Hotel California all these years later, but
Fortunately or unfortunately, we
Right.
do still hear Hotel
But for the
California.
most part, there are songs that you lived with for that summer you were 16, and they come back every once in a while, and as soon as it comes on, it puts you back to that summer when you were 16, or there was a song that you associate with a certain friend, right? And it's because the way your memory works is, although your memory can store individual features of an experience, like the song, like the shirt your friend was wearing when you spilled soup on it, and all of that stuff, it also forms the memory with links to all these things. So I play you a song and it'll flood your memories from that moment. And that is why music can trigger so much autobiographical memory, like Proust's Madeleines.
Right.
And it's also a key to how post-traumatic stress disorder can be treated.
Well, go on, yeah.
People with post-traumatic stress disorder are often in a state of hypervigilance, and the slightest little thing will set them off. But if you play the music that is familiar to them and calming, and ask them to recall the traumatic experience, it allows them to pull it out of memory, get recontextualized with this low cortisol, low fear song, and then put back in memory. And the key here, as my friend Kareem Nader showed, if you ever saw the film The Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, it was based on his research. And none of us in the field knew this until he discovered it. Any memory you recall of any kind, as soon as you pull it out and sort of have it in your consciousness, it is now prone to distortion. And when you put it back, it can get changed. Its emotional valence, whether it was happy or sad, the details of it, if somebody corrects you. And really the best evidence we have for this in our own lifetimes, the malleability of memory, was the Twin Towers, where most people in America, 80%, say they recall seeing television footage of a plane hitting the first tower and then hitting the second tower. And that is not what anybody saw, because the footage from the first tower did not exist for the first day or two. What everybody saw was the plane hitting the second tower. And then later, when somebody found some guy on the street who had this footage, they showed it. And what your brain said, maybe not out loud, but was, oh, I stored the second part of this sequence first, but it's actually the second, and so it rewrote it when it put it back, and everybody has this false memory, including President Bush, that they saw him in the wrong order. Your brain is making false memories like this all the time, and that can actually be a benefit if you've got stress associated with a certain memory. You can pull it out and recontextualize it, put it back.
Yeah. I don't know about you all, but I actually find this like incredibly wonderful that our memories are not like some concrete thing. It's not an object you put in your brain. It's part of you, right? It's an actual...
I write in the book about something that's very personally meaningful to me, which is the Beatles. And I had interviewed George Martin around the time that they were making the Beatles anthology in 1992 or so. And he and Paul McCartney and George Harrison and Ringo Starr got together with Jeff Emmerich, the engineer, on their early recordings, and they're trying to recall, well, who played one instrument and how many takes was this? And all of them had different and completely incompatible recollections. And then there's this guy, Mark Lewison, who was an archivist they hired, and he had all the boxes of tapes and all the contemporaneous notes, and he'd want to come in and say, well, no, Paul, you didn't
most
play
hated guy on
Yeah, exactly. No, Mark, don't say anything.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier Giffords and her
Gabby Giffords, yeah.
her ability to sing, when she couldn't talk. This is actually also something we find with people who stutter, right? That there are some people who have a stutter, but who can sing totally well. What's going on there?
So stuttering is another interesting thing, like a visual illusion or LF forgetting the lyrics. It's the system gone wrong, and so it allows us to see what the system does when it's working right. And I mean, by analogy, if you drive an old car, you may not know what a carburetor does or that you even have one until it breaks, right? So here, in order to speak fluently, what we need to do is set up what's called a motor action plan. Your brain needs to figure out what motor movements, your tongue, lips, jaw, and larynx are going to make. And they have to be made, they're very precise movements. Just a fraction of a millimeter would change a D to a T, or something like that, dog to tog, whatever tog means. And they have to be done in a precise order and in a precise timing. And when that system doesn't develop properly through childhood and maturation, you end up with stuttering. Because your brain knows what it needs to do, but it gets stuck at the actual motor part. And so stutterers, and it happens to many of us who aren't habitual stutterers when we're on stage with an important person, or we're live radio, or or having to give a speech. But in a stutterer, it causes them to get stuck, and it's because the internal clock that's supposed to orchestrate these movements in precise timing doesn't work. And so music acts as an external clock that this motor action plan, this sequence, can synchronize to
the beat.
And so you find people like Elvis Presley, who stuttered when he was speaking, or Mel Tillis.
Yeah, and we have a Mel Tillis song we'll play in a second.
Mel could barely speak, but he could sing, and sing fluently. And he sang some very difficult songs because that timer is working. It's exactly the same underlying mechanism as Parkinson's patients who have a degradation to the circuits that help them maintain a steady, even walking gait. And if you can't put one foot after another in a precise order and with precise timing, you either freeze or you fall over. That happens to many Parkinson's patients. But you play music that has the tempo of the gait, and G-A-I-T, gait.
Right.
And we've got entire populations of millions of neurons that automatically, without you willing them to, will fire in synchrony with the tempo. And so a Parkinson's patient can walk smoothly and continuously while the music is playing, and with rhythmic auditory stimulation therapy, can train circuits to do so that the patient only needs to imagine the music. Stuttering, Parkinson's, two sides of the same coin.
Let's hear, just in honor of Mel Tillis, Stay a Little Longer.
Okay, this is an extreme stutterer singing a very difficult song.
Sally, she lives away down on Shinbone Alley. The number on the gate and the number on the door. The next house over is a grocery store. Stay all night, stay a little longer. Dance all night, dance a little longer. Pull off your coat, throw it in the corner. Don't see why you don't stay a little longer.
So fascinating. I mean, how much can doing this therapy help, say, a Parkinson's patient?
We've seen patients who cannot walk, even with a walker. They shuffle. They can't really get one foot in front of the other. And after just music playing for about 15 seconds, their brains synchronize, and then they can walk without the walker.
Here's another question. Does a metronome work as well as music?
That is one of the best questions, because if it was just the rhythm, you would think so.
Yeah.
But they don't. They kind of work. There's something about how engaging music is, how emotionally rewarding it is, it's not just the rhythm. And it's not just any song, it has to be a song you like. It's really weird.
That's so interesting. You know, there is another really fascinating Parkinson's story in the book about a beloved Bay Area figure, Bobby McFerrin. Some people may know that he has like an improv session over at Freight and Salvage in Berkeley. I think it's on Monday.
Every Monday at noon,
Yeah,
he sings
yeah.
at Freight and Salvage for like $35. And I think we've made some vouchers available for a discount.
Oh, amazing.
Through Litquake. You've got to go see it. No two performances are alike. It's all improv. He comes out and he just is quiet for a moment, and whatever melody pops in his mind, he starts riffing on. It's extraordinary.
But it's partially a response to some of the degradation that he's experienced, right?
But the improv isn't, because that's always what he's done.
Yeah.
But right, when he was diagnosed with Parkinson's a few years ago, and we've spent a fair amount of time together. We made a documentary film together for PBS called The Music Instinct. We've sung together. He's visited my lab. And when he's not yet having trouble walking, but he is having some trouble with controlling the muscles that allow him to sing. So you wouldn't know it. I mean, he's one of the best singers on the planet. So him at 98%,
but he knows
is
it.
still,
Yeah.
he notices.
Yeah.
But mostly it was fatigue that he was experiencing and malaise. But when he starts singing, it releases dopamine for him, which motivates him to want to keep singing. And then other neurochemicals are released. And in the end, the singing is therapy for him. And if he weren't singing, he would not be in nearly as good a physical shape as he is. It actually boosts the immune system for all of us, and especially for him when he needs it. It helps him to keep active neural pathways that are necessary for basic thought and cognition. But because he's improvising, he's growing new neural pathways all the time. Every time he improvises a new song, that's a brand new neural circuit he's created. So he's building up all this cognitive reserve. We talked earlier, does music help with Alzheimer's? Learning to play an instrument, and it's never too late at any age, even 80, 90, even if you've got a disease like Alzheimer's, learning to play an instrument builds up new neural pathways so robustly that it can hide or mask Alzheimer's for years.
Wow. We're going to get to your questions, so get your questions ready. We're going to take them live here, just like real forum show. It's going to be about 2 minutes. I wanted to ask one final question about a condition here, which is, depression. When I think of times in my own life or people I've known who've been depressed, it does feel like certain types of music appeal, or music doesn't appeal at all. What is the sort of prescription for knowing that it's not going to cure depression to hear a special song, but like what's a way that it can alleviate what people are going through?
So this is quite paradoxical and interesting, but generally speaking, when we're depressed, not in every case, but generally, it's because in some sense we feel misunderstood. Somebody yelled at us, we had a fight with somebody, we didn't get the promotion we thought we deserved, whatever it is, you feel in some sense misunderstood and cut off from others. And so the last thing you want to hear is a happy song, because that's somebody else who doesn't understand how you're feeling. And you don't want somebody to come by and say, oh, buck up. You really have it pretty good.
Good day, sunshine.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. No, you're doing a good day, sunshine. No, you want to punch somebody. But you put on the right sad music, and within seconds you go, oh, I couldn't put it into words, but that is how I feel. I feel exactly like that. And then, at least at a subconscious level, you realize, oh, there's somebody here at the edge of the cliff staring into the abyss with me. And they've turned that experience that they had into they came out the other side, they turned it into a beautiful work of art. There's comfort in that. And our brains release soothing, tranquilizing, comforting hormones, and it can actually lift us up. And it can invoke a good cathartic cry, which is what often we need, and we don't allow ourselves to do it.
All right, we've got Ryan in the house with a mic.
In the house.
Yes, that's right. Who's got a question about? Oh yeah, sure. Coming up the stairs.
Hello, Daniel. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for being here.
Question for you. Is there any kind of medicinal use or effects that music can have on tinnitus? I suffer from
Yes.
pretty bad.
Tinnitus is a ringing in the ears, and it happens because the neuron, we didn't get into all the physiology here, but your neurons are tuned to specific frequencies. And in your brain and in the inner ear, if you were to unroll them, they would be like a piano keyboard, all the frequencies of the piano in order.
That's so crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
It's crazy.
And then some, because you can hear beyond the range of the piano. But what happens is with age often, or with overexposure to loud sound, some of those neurons stop firing, and your brain knows enough to say to itself, well, gee, I'm supposed to be getting input from them. There's something wrong. So I'll just create some input from them internally.
That's really
it's
what
a hallucination. Yeah. And so the therapy is you can buy these little white noise devices that make sound like, when a radio's between stations. Shh, and you tune the white noise device to where the ringing is, and you play it for 5 or 10 minutes, You fatigue the neurons that are causing that, and then you can be fine for a day or for 2 weeks. It depends on the person and all that.
Wow, that's wild. Let's go right here, if we can. Yeah.
Hi. I noticed that I have my AirPods in and I listen to music in the background all the time, but I seldom listen with attention. So I just wonder, what is the difference in benefit between having music playing versus listening with attention versus playing music?
That's a great question.
These are
playing an
very
instrument.
different experiences. We often use music as sonic wallpaper. People with ADHD find it helpful to work with music because it helps to quiet some of the chatter in their brains. And then listening to music attentively or intentionally is different. And then a third kind of listening to music is a kind of hybrid where you're not doing anything else and you may not be trying to analyze the music or anything, but you're allowing it to carry you away. And that's where the biggest benefits come from. That's where you can enter a trance state, a meditative state. It's where you allow your mind to wander. There's a mode of consciousness that we call the daydreaming mode. I mean, you're familiar with it. It's a very healthful and restorative mode to get into. And what we've learned is that I wrote a book about workplace productivity called The Organized Mind, and from a productivity and creativity standpoint, you don't want to work pedal to the metal for 6 or 8 hours. You want to give your mind a break. Probably every hour and a half or two, it depends on the person. And you want your mind to allow your mind to daydream because that hits a reset button in your brain. And that reset button is crucial to restoring spent metabolites and glucose in the brain from paying attention and exerting attention. Attention is a limited capacity resource. You can run out of it, so paying attention is really a very apt metaphor. But getting into that default mode of daydreaming, music is...
That's what it's actually called.
It's called the default mode.
Yeah.
Music is... And Vinod Menon, my friend at Stanford, and I discovered where that switch is that allows you to get in there. It's in a structure in the brain called the insula. And it's this neurochemical switch that takes you there.
I think
you
it's
can
for
get there,
me, it's on an Alice Coltrane record, actually.
Alice Coltrane, right? You can get in...
Yeah.
I think we played Alice Coltrane. You can get in there by walking in nature, by having a couple of drinks, by relaxing through meditation, but music is the most reliable way. So they're very different uses. They're not all the same.
So interesting. All right.
I'm sorry, you ask a professor a simple question and you get a long answer.
If the right piece of music can heal, can the wrong piece of music make you sick?
Yes,
Ooh,
I
I
I'm
love
thinking
this.
specifically of Hotel California.
The right piece of music can heal, the wrong piece of music can harm you. In that we've done surveys of 20,000 people about what do you find the most annoying things in modern life. And always in the top 5 is unwanted music piped into public spaces. Where you don't have the control over it. If you don't like something you're seeing, you close your eyes. Very hard to shut out your ears, even with earplugs and,
The big cans and everything.
what are they, noise reduction headphones. You can't get rid of all of it. And in fact, it was unwanted music that drove Manuel Noriega out of his compound, if you'll recall. The U.S. Army shut off his water and his power and air conditioning and food, and he still didn't give up the compound until they blasted Van Halen at 130 decibels.
It's interesting though because
Now,
it's a precise match for each person, right? I mean,
Right.
one of the things you note in the book is that heavy metal isn't like as a category bad for people. People who
not
like
at all.
heavy metal, it's like great for them.
I love Van Halen.
Yeah. That's interesting.
I would have gone there just to hear it.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Panama.
Take the palace. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ryan's got the next question up there. Yeah.
But the right music is what's right for you. You can't say that classical is better, heavy metal's bad, rap is bad. No, it's very subjective.
Right.
Just like you can't say what is the right food for you. Yeah, it has to have nutrients, but one food isn't really better than the other.
This is kind of continuing with what you were saying about has to be right for you. Have you documented or noticed a difference between the impact of music with lyrics versus instrumental music, and what's going on there? Because you made the joke about "Good Day Sunshine." Well, just those words itself can be annoying, or but the music itself. What is that difference?
People have different aspects of music they listen to. Some people really like lyrics. Some people don't notice them. They can sing them, but they don't really pay attention to what they're singing. You're mentioning Hotel California. I've been in many foreign countries where people don't speak a word of English, but if Hotel California comes on, they know all the words. So people have different sensitivities to lyrics, and then even people who love lyrics can be moved by a song like "I Feel Good" by James Brown, which is just "I feel good." Na 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 na. I knew that I would. I feel good. I mean, it's not Leonard Cohen, it's not Joni Mitchell, but it works for the song. And so the extent of the studies are that if you're lyrical oriented, lyrics can move you. If you're not, they often don't do any harm.
It's going to be an entire generation of people who lo-fi ambient.
Yeah.
Right? There's like a Spotify playlist.
Yeah.
Already my 11-year-old is just like, oh yeah, just put that on all the time. Man, every song's a minute and a half long. Anyway, sorry. Yes.
I love that you were talking about lyrics, because I was just, I've been listening to Bob Dylan and Leonard Cohen, and I've been writing the lyrics down, and I'm surprised at what they are now, 30, 40 years later. And, A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall, it says, I met a young man who was wounded in love, and then I met a young man who was wounded in hatred. And it's a hard rain that's gonna fall. And it just took my breath away. And so I've started listening to Cat Stevens and James Brown, of course, but Cat Stevens and Leonard Cohen and Bob Dylan, and writing the lyrics down and really kind of digesting them, because I've always loved the music. And so it kind of stunned me.
I'm glad you said, okay.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm going to just add on that I am like a Mondegreen factory. Mondegreens are like where you mishear the lyric. Like, I'm an incredibly verbal word person, but my music, the lyrics and the voice is just another instrument. Like,
So what are some of your
cannot hear the
Mondegreens?
words. Well, I don't know. I'm just like literally.
Like,
if you played
excuse
me a
me-
song right now, I would get it wrong.
I mean,
would
like
get all the lyrics.
Jimi Hendrix, "Excuse me while I kiss this guy."
This guy.
Yes.
yeah,
Kiss-
exactly.
yeah.
Like that. Yeah.
Or the Go-Go's "Alex the Seal."
Yeah. Well, and I just wondered if
There's a bathroom on the right.
there's a bathroom. Which one's that?
There's a bad moon on the right.
Oh, yes.
Bathroom.
yes. Well, and I've just wondered, though, if there are different, if people respond really differently to lyrics in that way, right?
They do, and it's so interesting that you're writing them down, because we just recently learned in my field that the act of writing something down longhand allows it to enter more deeply into your brain and engages a deeper level of processing than typing it or just taking it in and memorizing it. It facilitates reflection. And in some sense, the lyrics become yours as you write them. And it's a wonderful exercise, and it's an exercise. I teach songwriting classes now and then at Berklee College of Music, or with songwriter friends like Rodney Crowell and Victor Wooten at getaways that they do. And one of the exercises that's very powerful is find a lyric you like, write it down, and see how it works. And there is some wonderfully moving poetry in there, often where you least expect it.
And I was watching the Harold and Maude, and someone had the subtitles on.
Harold and Maude with subtitles.
So then all of a sudden, I realized that every single song was that he had been hired to write the music to Harold and Maude, and every single song was connected to the scene, and I started writing them down. So,
Let's take one more question, I think. Maybe two, if we have to.
Hi. I wonder if you could talk about people who don't seem to respond to music. So I'm a musician. I have a husband and a mother who really couldn't care less, never want to hear it. never seem to have any.
I heard there was a
can't hum
secret
tone,
chord.
like-
David played and it pleased the Lord, but you don't really care for music, do you?
Exactly.
Yeah. Getting back to Darwin, the whole point of natural selection is descent with modification, which is the idea that there has to be random mutation or we could all be wiped out by a single virus. And most of these random genetic mutations have effects that we don't notice, but every once in a while we do. And we estimate that 10% of the population do not like music. They don't understand why the rest of us are spending our money on it. They don't get it.
I like that the one person in here who came to the music thing because they don't like music is like,
Yeah, well, exactly. And they've learned to disguise it because the rest of us look at them askance. But yeah, but I mean, it stands to reason. Probably 10% of the population don't like chocolate, which I find unfathomable. And 10% of the population, more or less, don't like sex at all. And so, there's individual variability. So, yeah, music cannot help them. One more question?
yeah, one more question last.
Yeah, adding to the list of musicians, I'm a musician as well. I wanted to ask you if in your research or what are your thoughts on specific combination of notes having specific effects on the brain or healing in specific ways. People have tried that in the context of Indian music and have found it work. I'm curious to know your thoughts.
Clearly, specific combinations of notes have an effect on us, but nobody's figured out what the magic formula is, or if they did, they'd be writing hit song after hit song or therapeutic song after therapeutic song. The problem is that once you figure it out, it's a moving target because then we predict it's going to be that, and so it won't surprise us anymore. There has to be at least a little element of surprise.
So interesting. We are going to get one final song from Gary Muszynski, and is it not right?
Oh, I don't know. You want me to play again?
Yeah, we want you to play again. Yeah. But first, I want to remind everyone, this Saturday, we're holding KQED Fest. It's going to be here at the building and, outside 11 to 6. It's a free festival, block party, open house right here. Music, pop-up performances, food, and forum with Mina Kim. We'll be here on this stage with David Diggs, so I hope to see you there. Once again, Daniel Levitin and Gary Muszynski.
This is a song I wrote as a duet between a waitress in a coffee shop and a truck driver. She starts first. Standing at the counter of the Digby Cafe, I never did marry. My heart is a brand new cup unfilled with dreams, so sweet to carry. His turn. I bring the coal to your cold house. I bring the fire to your stove. I try to catch your eye as you serve. Give me one more smile for the road. Her turn again. I pour a lonely cup of coffee. Bring it slowly to my lips, like the objects in the mirror of the truck you drive up here. Oh, honey, I'm closer than I appear. I know how you like your hash browns, crispy and well done. I cut your grapefruit segments and then I get that special spoon. You deserve a perfect man, one who don't drink or fight. But life's a burned out cigarette, and we all could use a light. I pour a lonely cup of coffee, bring it slowly to my lips, like the objects in the mirror of the truck I drive up here. Oh honey, I'm closer than I appear. One morning in May, as the roosters crowed, the kitchen broke out in a fire. Digby and everyone else raced out. I fell down and thought I heard the angels' choir. I ran to her, held her high across my chest, laid her down outside and kept her from the wind. Cradled her head gently in my hands. Her eyes were closed, her breathing thin. I poured a loving cup of coffee, raised it slowly to her lips, and as she raised her head, her eyes were bright and clear. She said, honey, I'm closer than I appear. We both said, honey, we're closer than we appear. Thank you.
That was Daniel Levitin and Gary Muszynski. Gary's new album is The Journey Home, Songs of Longing and Belonging. This is Daniel's new book. I heard there was a secret chord, music as medicine. Thank you very much for coming. Appreciate your time.